Mike Renner in the building. He made it. He hasn't slept in like 3 weeks because he's been working on the draft guide.
I think all week.
You look decent considering.
I know, and it was crazy because I stayed up so late Saturday night trying to finish it, but then couldn't, so I had to get some sleep, and so I ended up waking up at like 2 yesterday, and then when I finally did finish, all I wanted to do was go to sleep, and I couldn't because I'd woken up so late. So I'm all
back to data
but I'm back.
collection days.
Yeah.
I have a question. Are you not familiar with something called Adderall?
Oh, I am. I don't have a prescription yet.
You don't know anyone that has that?
That's called.
Ayers,
that's
you're
illegal.
young enough to still have
you can't promote that.
You're young enough to still have an Adderall prescription. All
Why do
right.
you say that?
So we're gonna talk about the PFF draft guide, which
Yes.
dropped today. Mike, of course, is the numero uno head author, PFF's lead draft analyst, and we're gonna talk a little bit about how you attack the draft process, the draft guide process, how Eric and I attack it, and then talk about some of the more interesting discussions like Burrow versus Tua, Simmons and Chase Young. Should be a lot of fun. I want to start with this. Did you watch any XFL this week?
I have yet to watch an actual full game of XFL.
Wow.
So disappointed.
So
I know,
2/3
Eric's like, judge me. I've also not watched any WNBA this year also, Eric, so you can.
Has the WNBA
not,
even started?
we're on different wavelengths.
It hasn't.
The WNBA hasn't started.
Oh,
yet.
okay. That's something.
The WNBA starts in late May, which is exactly when you find out that baseball's trash.
I found baseball was trash about a decade ago. So
Did you watch the fight?
I watched the replay of it. I was too deep in the draft guide.
True.
We got to this right.
That's fair. Eric, did you watch the fight?
I followed along on Twitter because obviously I bet on it. And,
Who did you bet on?
The dog, the winner.
You bet on Fury?
Yeah. I mean,
So you followed me.
I tailed you, yeah.
Yeah.
I might have got a worse number, which is why, again, Twitter posting of your bets is bad. But no, it was kind of fun, and but mostly I was working on draft stuff, so I didn't want to pay the $70 to ESPN Plus to watch a
Yeah, it's
draft
like
that I bet.
85. I was watching this, and the first thought I had was like, does being in shape matter?
Dude, I don't know if it does. That he was a horse.
Dude is insane. He's like made of blubber, and he's quicker than anyone I've ever seen.
I just think it's probably our proxy for being in shape is maybe off, right? Like there are plenty of people who are like cut who can't run or who can't like be
But like,
quick.
do you have that little like barrier, that little buffer to take hits? You know,
True.
like there's that
You can
probably
be too
matters
cut.
some. Yeah.
After like the baseline amount of like competence you need to be a boxer, isn't it all just how nuts you are probably? Like,
Think?
Yeah.
Well, he did get carried out on a throne, so nuts.
Yeah. But this other guy's bleeding through his ear, and he looks like. I mean,
Is that a bigger moment than Holyfield getting his ear bit off?
No.
Actually licking the blood? No, you're probably right.
Because first off, the lick was figurative. We didn't actually get. If he had licked, actually made contact, but he was just teasing us a little bit. The bite was real.
Okay,
if the bite happened,
This is fair. I don't know
If
what
the
you brought.
bite happened with current Twitter, the world would be.
Tyson,
flames.
an example of somebody who obviously has the requisite boxing skills and is nuts. So
Yeah,
True.
It was a good it's a little small sample size, but I think we're.
I mean, the three of us don't have the requisite boxing skills, so it doesn't matter if we're crazy or not.
Right.
But if somebody had,
I'm just so happy because I was really debating whether I was going to pay the money for it. I was like, all right, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to bet on Fury. So if he wins, then I'll easily make my money back, plus some. And if not, at least I'll probably see a knockout. Because the coolest thing about that fight was that the whole time I was on edge because I was like, one punch. Like Fury's winning this whole thing.
Yeah.
But Wilder with one punch could end it.
Dude, it's how great sudden death overtime is, right? Like it's exactly the same thing. It's like this thing could end at any moment. That every boxing match is like that.
I think that's why people. Well, not every boxing match. You watch like Pacquiao, Mayweather. That's not what it is.
Yeah.
That's why heavyweights are the best. Is because the drama of every punch is way more than watching two dudes hang on each other for 15 rounds.
If you were to so now we're going to get into the draft process.
Yes.
Oh, we
Better
didn't even talk about the XFL.
No,
for
we're
half
not.
a second.
Let's just not. Better draft prospect, Deontay Wilder or Tyson Fury?
Ooh, probably Wilder.
You think so?
Yeah.
You wouldn't put Fury out there at left tackle?
That's actually better. That's actually a good point. Fury probably at tackle. I was thinking more like athlete-wise.
So quick?
His kick step would probably be
But
amazing.
Fury at tackle might be legit, actually. He's got the
Wilder's
bend.
kind of skinny.
Yeah, Wilder is like he's like probably a wide receiver, with that build at the next level, which is I don't know how his jump ball skills are.
Right. You need he would probably have stone hands, frankly, because since he's been wrapped up for 20 years.
And they're probably just like mangled. Like they probably don't work anymore.
This is a good point.
David Boston.
I think Fury would be a phenomenal left tackle. So that was our draft night analysis. Let's start on the draft guide here. So I want to ask you this question because all of us do different things at PFF, and we all have our own process for them. And a lot of times they get kind of buried, and people just see the final result, and they're like, oh, this is kind of cool. The draft guide is like 800 pages.
Yes.
It's ridiculous. Every year, if you want to be prepared as any human on earth, if you just read the draft guide, you will be that person. So I'm curious, from start to finish, what is your process like?
Yeah, like you mentioned that this is stuff that's in this draft guide that has never been done before. Like no one's ever charted all of college football drops, coverage grades, the coverages that they run. This is something that's like unheard of in history, and you'll find like the nuggets, the best stuff in the draft guide. But the process is basically me going through, and I start with the grades. Like the grades are a good indicator of necessarily where a guy is, how he played, how he executed his role. But I think that's the biggest thing is what I do to sort of translate those grades into a projection to the next level is see, one, what that role was. Because a lot of times, especially in college, if you are a better player, you're given a more difficult role. And in our grading, it doesn't necessarily reflect the role that you were given. So if you're an athletic middle linebacker, they might ask you to go cover the slot. If you're an unathletic middle linebacker, you might just spot drop and have no sort of coverage responsibilities. You're just the spy, in that scheme. So you're not really getting tested in coverage. And the guy who's the limited role might have a bad grade or a good grade, because he's not getting tested, or when he does make plays, it's coming up forward. But the guy who is asked to cover the slot wide receivers gets a bad grade, but he's actually much better in coverage because they're asking him to cover the slot. They're asking him to do a lot more. So I think I kind of pair those together, pair what the grade says versus what the role was asking him to do and how difficult that was and how impressively he executed it. And then that ends up being the projection. I use the data you guys have researched in terms of what actually matters, what aspects of the position are more valuable, what positions are more valuable, and then that's I watch all these plays hours on these guys.
I was going to say how much of because I that's super smart, and I'm curious how much of the way to what role did this guy play can you get to before you have to watch, before you have to grind the tape? My own personal curiosity, how far can I get before I have to watch film?
No, you can get pretty far in terms of just if you collect the coverage scheme, if you collect where they were lined up on the field, if you collect, as a wide receiver, the routes they ran. If you collect a lot of that, you could probably get pretty darn close. But then stuff like explosiveness, actual athleticism and how they look on the football field, their instincts is going to be I think there's still room for the human element in that regard that you're just until you get actually chip data on these guys, you're not going to be able to tell. Now, if you get chip data, I think you can almost eliminate sort of from a lot of us in that aspect.
Yeah, I think looking at sort of how their movement skills are pretty, something to glean from that. But even again, just the intent is also something you're trying to infer, and that's tricky as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, one of the things that we do in our process is basically try to go through and normalize by all of the things that a guy's asked to do. So if he's a linebacker and he's playing in the slot, he's going to have a negative expected grade.
Yeah.
You sort of normalize from that and everything. You get a better look at that. But if he's consistently asked to do things that he's not good at, we actually don't have the counterfactual of what if he just spot dropped in the NFL or all that kind of stuff. We saw that with Kansas City this year in the Super Bowl. Their Super Bowl run, they just had linebackers who couldn't do what they were asked to do previous seasons, and then you're only going to do things you're good at, right? So but looking at them in free agency, you're like, well, is this guy valuable at all? He graded okay in PFF down the stretch, but they didn't ask him to do anything. It's a really interesting question.
And I think one of the guys that you highlighted in the linebacker position, Davion Taylor, was a great example of that. The analytics, the data really likes him because the role he was doing at sort of Colorado was a very difficult role for a linebacker to execute, and he was still, grading out well, making plays on the football in that role. means, oh man, he probably has pretty good coverage skills for a linebacker, even if like the grade itself wasn't that good.
Well, and doesn't that highlights sort of how important this week is, which I think we always like overvalue this week at the combine and the measurements. But if Davion Taylor comes out and measures as well as he played, as well as he looked on the football field, then you're looking at somebody who's like, okay, not very good against the run, but extremely athletic as a line, like kind of a Deion Jones type of like athlete on the interior level. And then he has all the combine measurements. He obviously, he interviews well with the teams, and this is a prospect that teams might want, even though he's not considered the best linebacker in the draft.
Hold up there, because you said we overvalue the combine. That is not true from a we as in we in
this
football.
This is a football.
So
I'm
curious.
football.
I'm curious, Mike.
Yeah.
You've been with PFF how long?
8 years.
It's been a long time.
Yeah.
Your hair is. Have you cut your hair?
I've
since
had
then?
no other job as an adult besides working at PFF.
I do think
cut it
right
2 years ago.
I do think right now you are really. If you go clean shaven, you look like a second grade elementary school teacher. Like Mrs. Renner walks into her class.
Yeah.
Hair pulled back, glasses on.
I'd be a pretty damn cute elementary
You're
school
a Peloton
teacher.
rider.
Like,
you could be the first ever
those kids.
Bachelorette and Bachelor contestant, I think. But anyways, the combine.
That was like out of nowhere.
Yeah.
It's like from left field.
But what I want to know is,
Let's just take a shot at Mike one time.
You want me to get to you?
Yeah.
The combine though, like I assume have come down from how much you value it. But early on, were you like, okay, I'm going to look at the grades, I'm going to look at the role, and then the combine's going to be this huge piece that confirms or denies? How has that process gone?
Well, I think it's more. The more I've watched of these guys, the more I'm like, I actually have a good handle on what they should run, like what they should be. And then at that point, if you've watched enough tape on a guy, you should know. But I think it's the best use of it is like if you want to separate two guys who you're close on, like take the better athlete. Take the guy who's more well-rounded athlete usually is how I will use it. It's not like, oh my God, DK Metcalf ran a 4.33. He's got to go in the top 10 now. No, it's not like that. It's not like
because that still happens.
It does.
That's why people who don't either analyze the data or watch the tape, they're going into it with a relatively flat prior, and they're like, okay, this guy ran a 4.3, this guy ran a 4.44, and it's like, okay, the 4.3 guy's way better. And like it's because they come in there, they don't have the hours of tape built in to have the right calibration on what a 4.3 means in this setting.
And you almost have to watch these guys before you see these drills, or else you get this anchoring bias of, oh damn, 4.3. Like if you didn't watch,
and then you go look for that 4.3 in the tape.
Exactly. So you really have to do the work before you get there, or else you're very much susceptible to, like I said, anchor bias.
Hunting for 4.3s in the tape sounds like exactly what you do.
It's my memoir.
I was just gonna say that, but I allowed you to.
I just catch Eric in the break room. What are you doing, buddy? I'm just looking at tape, just trying to find the 4.3.
I actually grinded tape on a running back this last week.
Oh God, it's a disaster. But Eric, what do you think? So, did you ever think the combine was that valuable? I always have felt like it was a bunch of noise.
Yeah, what I thought it was a kind of an advertisement for the NFL or an extra event. I mean, I remember Vernon Davis running, like in college, I was a tight end, and I was like, okay, who do I try to emulate athletically? And Vernon Davis is like running a 4.3, and I'm like, okay, that's not it.
A little more Anthony Fasano back then.
Yeah. And sort of like looking at, but it does give you a decent grouping of like types of athletes. I think it's important there. It certainly, like Matt Jones was a quarterback from Arkansas who ran like a 4.37. What was he taking in the first round?
Yeah, that was an all-time combine riser.
As a wide receiver for the Jacksonville Jaguars. So it certainly like is something that we scoff at a little bit, and I think even before we had access to all this information, we scoffed at. But back in the day, it was something that it's only increased in importance as we've gotten smarter. So I think we sort of have had the sort of right answer the whole time.
Eric, I want you to talk a little bit about the athleticism measure that we build. So like our projections, what happens in the draft guide, what happens on the computer, they are pretty similar, right? We have processes that may be different in the way that we actually get them done. Like you look for the role the guy played, so does the math, right? It looks at the facet he played, the value of those facets, and then makes that projection into the NFL. We do have an athleticism measure. Eric, you're pretty proud of it. And
it's
I think I think it's worth talking a little bit about how that that gets built in and what it means.
Well, the thing is so the tough part about data science is that there are missing data points everywhere, and there's noise everywhere. And so one of the first things you have to do is you have to figure out what to do when somebody actually doesn't measure them, like doesn't get measured, right? And we've done a bunch of techniques with basically every single person. We know their height and weight. Every single player, we sort of know what they're trying to do. Whether if it's an edge player, we're talking about pass rushing, run defense, sometimes coverage. And so what we want to do is build a metric to say, okay, what would somebody for whom we had no information on how good of a football player they were, how would they grade in our system based upon their athleticism? And so for missing players, you basically just take height and weight, and it's like, it's not a terrible measure. We have a bunch of historical data about how those guys have historically comped, and you take like K nearest neighbors, and it's pretty simple.
I was just about to say, one of the most underrated aspects of the combine is just getting accurate heights and weights on these guys. Because you look at, even going back to actually the Senior Bowl, some of the running backs there. So Keyshawn Vaughn, running back for Vanderbilt, was listed at 219 for Vanderbilt. Comes in at 205. Those are two different running backs. Darius Anderson listed at 212 for TCU. Comes in at 195. Like, those are two very different types of running backs that you just...
Both of which just don't matter. But yeah.
But I'm saying, but like an edge as well. Like, edge is a position where if you're under 240 pounds,
you're just going to have.
You're not going to get the job done. Exactly. So like, I think that and like arm length stuff actually like does matter. That is actually an underrated sort of aspect of it.
Yeah, and then the other tricky thing is that so many of these drills correlate with each other. So we take the 20-yard increment of the 40-yard dash and consider those two variables two separate ones, when in reality it's probably about 1.2 variables. Or we look at broad jump and we look at some other measurement like 40-yard dash, and we think that they're independent. And it's really like, no, I mean, if somebody's explosive in the 40, they're generally going to be explosive in the broad jump. And so what you have to do is you have to take that information and you have to squeeze from it, 2.5, 3 principal variables from that. And then ask yourself, okay, how does that correlate to doing what they're going to do at the NFL level? And then the other thing is you have to differentiate those. So being a run defender is a totally different thing. Your athleticism scores are going to correlate to run defense way different than they're going to correlate to pass rush. So in some sense, some of these guys like Derek Brown, right? He's going to be a guy who's like, as a run defender, I think all of his measurables are going to be great. And he's going to have to really work to get the projection up for pass rush, right? And whereas Donnell Hunter was somebody who was like a great run defender in college and a so-so pass rusher, and then all of his athleticism measurements pointed towards this guy's going to be a good pass rusher in the pros. And then you also have to look at, okay, and there are other things, like, so for example, wide receiver, edge, those positions are such where combine data really does matter. And there are other things where it really doesn't, other than, as Mike said, height and weight.
So I want you to give me your top 3 in terms of like position and combine event that matter. Okay. And then the bottom 3. So like the most useful and the least useful.
All right. Most useful, I will go, oh man, really put me on the spot here. I'll go edge and 10 split. Probably. Okay. 10 split on the edge, if you can get off the football.
That makes sense.
Good thing. I think then 40 for cornerbacks is just indicative of what kind of cornerback you are. If you don't, so like if at cornerback position, if you run a 4.6 and the guy gets a step on you who runs a 4.4, you can't guard that guy in man coverage. You just like, you're not going to be able to play man coverage, man free with no help over the top. You're not going to be able to execute that role.
And that limits your defense schematically.
Exactly. And so 40 for cornerbacks, and then, gosh, what else? I might
not 40 for running backs, or
speed score
quarterbacks.
And then I think edge is the one
Wonderlick?
Oh god, and I think edge, the 3-cone for edge is also very important. I think edge is one where like the numbers very much matter in terms of athleticism.
Edge is the position where you think about like what is the sort of like the position where athleticism is the most controlled and acute, and it's edge, right? Because you're in it literally a track stance half the time. You're trying to beat a guy who's not nearly as athletic as you most of the time, and there are a handful. So like it's really point A to point B with very little resistance, and how efficient can you be getting there? And I think a lot of the stuff that the combine measures, it's fairly correlated with that.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you think about the 10 split is how fast you can get upfield, and the 3-cone is how fast you can then turn. It's right. Like that's it. That's what the edge rush is.
That's what I was going to say. Also, that's interesting is a lot of the time, the the drill does not mimic what a player is going to be asked to do.
That's why.
But for like a 10 split is quite literally, okay, an edge guy is going to line up in that stance, give or take.
Yeah.
And they're going to fucking run straight downfield as fast as they can. Exactly. And then they're going to make a move, either, a cut in, or they're going to give some sort of, hand movement and try and continue to get around. And that literally is the 3-cone, right? How quickly can you change direction? Okay. Least useful.
Least useful, 40 for quarterbacks. No.
I think the Wonderlink is the least useful.
Okay. I was thinking like actual athletic testing.
Is it Wonderlick?
I like the link better now.
Well, after the boxing match, I'm going to call it the Wonderlick.
Well, I think we should get the Wonder
We should
link.
take the Wonderlick.
We should.
As a PFF.
Yeah.
They administer those. Like, you can have them come in.
I will put my money on Eric.
Nathan Yaki.
Wolfie.
I'm going to take Steve not winning that one.
Damn it.
No comments on. Okay.
All right. So the Wonderlicked.
The Wonderlick. The issue with the Wonderlick is that the false positive rate is just so high.
Right.
Like,
well, wouldn't it be better if you actually had a standard? And I was going to ask you this. This is one of my questions for you. Do you think we could come up with a standardized football acumen test for these guys?
Ooh.
Right? Because my big thing with the Wonderlick is like, hey, who gives a fuck if this guy knows how many breads, baskets of bread I can buy with $10?
I was gonna say
like,
it's like kind of like critical thinking, but then there also be like what month comes 2 times after like July, which like if you don't know the months that well, like you're not gonna like there is some like you have to like have prior knowledge.
Look, let's not talk about Jamarcus Russell like that.
There's a great deal of like cultural like issues too, like with all standardized tests, and that one included. And the thing is like there are just some people like Brett Favre is one of the smartest football players I've ever seen, and probably dumb as a box of rocks if you measure him by the Wonderlick.
You don't think he knows the months?
You know what I'm saying? Like, or even like we talk about like Lamar Jackson did poorly on the Wonderlick, Favre. You also but the football smarts of those two players are just unbelievable. The instincts that they have, right? Yeah. Randy Moss probably fell asleep during the Wonderlick, and he's probably the smartest football player that's ever played.
Yeah, it's like the ability to put what you know into action quickly is not measured necessarily there on the Wonderlick.
Yeah, I do think they try to get the quickness component.
Yeah, that is.
But it's like I don't care about your quickness in the months of the year. I care about your quickness in diagnosing like a blitz or a coverage. And so I do think that would be a really I wish I could be in the interviews with the players because that would be one of the things I would want to do is kind of have a standardized football acumen test that I would administer. I think that'd be cool.
Because also one of the biggest like myths about football is that it's a super complex game. Like if you have to actually take in every single thing at once, yes, it's pretty complex. But each player is executing simple role.
Well, that's
each player has a very easy thing to do on every single player.
That's one of the interesting things about coaching, right? Because like the smartest people in the world take something complex and boil it down to something simple, so that other people can execute it. And you look at like you look at either like you mic up the coaches in whatever league, and the dumbest ones are the ones that have like these essays for play calls, and the smartest ones are the ones that are like mash. On 2. It's like, and that's the thing. It's like exactly. It's taking complex stuff and boiling it down. And these players don't have to be like the most intelligent. The offensive line's a little tough because you have to know what all 5 are doing, and quarterback obviously. But like some of these players, like cornerback, like some of these guys just got to lock down the guy in front of them for 40 plays a game.
But I will say 60 shuttle. Actually, I completely forgot is the worse. Like people don't even do the 60 shuttle, but they still administer it. You'll get like less than half the people, even at like a position like wide receiver, even do it. It's just I don't know why they keep doing it.
That's one that I would like all of our office to do. All right, so we're gonna do 2 things real quick, and after this quick break. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna talk Tua versus Burrow. How close actually are they? Yep. And Isaiah Simmons versus Chase Young. I think there's an argument to be made for Simmons over Young. Before we do, the 2-for-1 Drafts Pod. It's you. It's Austin Gale. It's awesome. You should check it out. You should go download it. If you do not listen to subscribe, I mean, it's fantastic. Like it's great. And the cool thing about it is if you listen to it throughout the year, by the time the draft comes along, you don't have to cram because you're already prepared for stuff. And then the draft guide, it's out. Get a PFF subscription. Go to pff.com. You have to have it. If you don't, then you just don't take football seriously. So, Burrow, Tua, how close are they?
So I think they're pretty close as prospects. And Todd McShay saying he'd go Tua over Burrow if both were healthy. And obviously, like, you kind of just have to take that health right now and just put it away. 'Cause we don't know. Like, we're not doctors. We don't know the prognosis. We don't know what it's going to be.
I did say at a Holiday Inn Express last night.
Yeah. My dad actually is a doctor. We talk about this a lot, and that's why I don't want to talk about it anymore. But but no, I think because the missing aspect here is like Burrow is great. Burrow is incredible this year. Tua was incredible as a true freshman. Like Tua's never played bad football, and he's 2 years younger. Could, like, theoretically, like, there's nothing holding him back from accuracy-wise, decision-making-wise, getting to that level that Burrow was in 2 years. So I do think they're pretty close, but I'm always going to lean towards the guy you've already seen it with. You know, you're always going to lean towards the guy you've already seen that higher end with, even if it is at a little bit of an older age. So I'll lean Burrow, but I do think Tua's underrated to some degree in this class. If you're talking like Herbert versus Tua, that's just
it's unbelievable.
I'm so glad you said that, because my thought with what the Bengals should do is, if you could get Tua, I would trade down. Mm-hmm. Because you could probably get a huge haul for the number 1 pick. But I'm not willing to drop to 5 where I might end up with Herbert. Right? The drop-off is too massive.
It's almost like if you want to draft Burrow and then Burrow to pull an Eli Manning.
Right.
And then you flip it for Tua. Yeah.
Yeah, and it
although you're held hostage and probably won't get the trade value back, but yeah.
Right, and it worked well. That worked well for both franchises back then. I mean, the Chargers got Rivers, and he was great.
It seems like depending on who you want to argue for, you say, okay, the scheme really helped, you know, either Joe Burrow or Tua out a lot, and so therefore like both of them, was there a distinct advantage, do you think, that one had over the other in terms of just either competition level or how much his scheme and his athletes helped him?
I think Tua's receivers got open more, and I think Burrow's scheme was a little more, I don't want to say better or like simplistic, but it was more, it was something that college football wasn't really ready for. So as many empty sets, like it was just something that defenses in college football, yeah, exactly.
So the question we had on our show last week was, so you take would you rather have a guy who was consistently good in one system over the course of an entire college career? Mm-hmm. How would you weigh that? Because that's obviously great to have. Would you weigh that more than a player who is decent, not great, and then was able to capitalize on a scheme change? Because the NFL quarterbacks, aside from maybe 4 or 5 guys, mm-hmm. are all going to be guys who, hey, we got to get the system and infrastructure good for this player. And if you can't capitalize on that and be great, your ceiling is obviously lower.
It's tough because one was afterwards. If it was the other way around in terms of Burrow was great in 2018 and then fell back when the scheme changed, then I'd be pretty hesitant. But if it was just like he developed in terms of a lot of other things that were, you know, like pocket presence, like a lot of other things that were not necessarily scheme dependent. So that one's difficult, but just purely in a vacuum, I would probably lean towards the guy who's been consistently excellent in one scheme than the guy who, you know, scheme change. But at the college level, it's so difficult to parse that out.
So like Mayfield's one were 3 years in the same scheme, mm-hmm. so there's not that adversity of having to change, but mm-hmm. there's brilliance in being asked to do one thing consistently and doing it well.
Yeah.
I think
the interesting thing with Mayfield is, first off, we have no idea yet because the Freddie Kitchens thing was a total fucking dumpster fire.
Right.
And the second thing is there was an element of uniqueness to that scheme too, right? Like Lincoln Riley, Joe Brady, these are guys that were innovating seriously at the college level, and that helps a lot. What I keep coming back to with Joe Burrow is this dude was a pro last year. Like, he was living the lifestyle of a professional quarterback. He was preparing mm-hmm. in that way. And we see it in life. Like, preparedness is a huge edge. So preparing with something that is unique at the college level, it does give him a leg up. And I do, for that reason, also believe that, look, Tua could easily get to that level.
Yeah.
And so the difference between those two is just...
I think the point of this entire thing is that there are exactly two quarterbacks who are worthy of a franchise quarterback draft, right? And then the other guys, the Jordan Loves, the Justin Herberts, the Anthony Gordons, those guys are. If they're drafted in the first round, I'm going to have the same response as I did when Brady Quinn was drafted by the Browns.
Ooh, what was that? Do you remember?
God, I can't talk bad about Brady Friend of the PFF pod.
Brady Quinn is a fantastic human being, and thou shalt not use his name in vain.
Brady Quinn's yoked.
Okay.
You know George's going to love.
Here's the next thing that so Eric wrote a really good piece about Isaiah Simmons, and I have a soft spot in my heart for Derwin James, in large part because I still have a Derwin James 49ers jersey on order that's never going to get fulfilled. And the ability to have a guy that's basically...
They win Super Bowl with Derwin James?
We're going to cut. The ability to get a guy who is multifaceted in coverage, but also like a chess piece from a pass rushing standpoint, is in my opinion, the most fail-safe thing you can get on the defensive side of the ball, combined with the most valuable thing you can get. So why would you not take Isaiah Simmons, or at least consider Isaiah Simmons over Chase Young?
I think it's because Chase Young is Isaiah Simmons, unlike anything we've ever seen at the linebacker, safety position, whatever. But I don't think it's to the level of what Chase Young is to edge position. And it's so much so, like he is, to me, he is a guy that you just have to account for in terms of like chips, altering your offense. And if you can alter your offense, if you alter a different offense, it has value that I don't think you can necessarily measure purely based on, like you can't single block. I don't think you're going to be able to single block Chase Young. Like, and that is going to alter your scheme. And yes, he's not going to provide pressure to add value, like necessarily measurable, but having to chip him and having to account for him is just going to provide that sort of game planning value that I'd rather have at this point.
Chase Young is most like which NFL player?
Honestly, the comp in the draft guide was Aldon Smith, and he's like Aldon Smith, but like more athletic
and not a complete fucking head case.
Not.
And Aldon Smith was dominant. I mean,
He was
dominant
really
NFL
good.
player.
So my question would be then, would you rather have, and Derwin James probably isn't even that great of a comp for Isaiah Simmons, to be perfectly honest, but like, would you rather have that kind of a player or Aldon Smith? And I think most people at first take would be like, oh shit, I'd rather have Aldon Smith 10 times out of 10. But I don't think it's that. You can scheme pressure in today's NFL.
Here's the tricky thing. The scarcity of players like Luke Kuechly and Bobby Wagner is immense. There's only, we're
And
really,
those guys aren't even that.
we're stretching it
Yeah.
really thin to get to guys like Fred Warner, who's good, but not like franchise altering, in my opinion. Deion Jones, guys like that. There are edge players who are amazing. Like Chandler Jones gets 20 sacks like every year, and he does like we never hear of him because the Cardinals are cheeks every year, right? Like and there's like an edge player. They
that a
grow
good
on
or bad
trees.
thing?
But what I was gonna say was, you feel more comfortable about saying Chase Young is going to be generational than you do about Isaiah Simmons, just based on the grading, the athletic measuring at edge. Like if you have those, you feel good about a guy.
We're far better
Isaiah
at
Simmons, you like saying if he's Derwin James, you promise me he's Derwin James, I'll probably take Derwin James over it. But I don't like that's a high promise.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
That edge is way easier to predict than coverage.
Exactly.
I mean, but that's the thing. So Derwin James was the best pass rusher in that draft class.
Yeah, dude.
Is Isaiah Simmons the second best pass rusher in this draft class?
That's what I haven't seen that necessarily from Derwin James. Like Derwin James threw an offensive tackle from Florida when he was a true freshman to the side. That
you
was
mean
like
you didn't see
rare.
that from Isaiah Simmons?
Yeah, he's good, but not like
that level. Because I would go so far as to say, this is just hurtful for me, but like a healthy Derwin James, I'm not sure there's a defensive player that I would take before him.
But back to the 49ers point, I don't think they win the Super Bowl because then they don't get Nick Bosa.
And he's been great.
If he's Derwin James, because he would have been that good, they wouldn't have got the second overall pick. So they would have drafted Cleveland Farrell.
Their tank in 2018 would have been 5-11 instead of 4-12.
Exactly.
Furl?
Yeah, okay.
This has been fantastic, Mike. This has been a lot of fun. I want one last thing to get out of here on. I am a sucker for, in the fourth round, getting excited about some random receiver or
Kyle Aletto.
corner. I got really excited about Kyle
your
Aletto.
quarterback.
Josh
Please tell me who I should get really excited about in the fourth round.
Okay, random receiver?
Anyone.
Anyone?
I'm
You're
just
going to
saying,
get excited about
I'm the guy in Madden who just looked at how fast the guy was and said I can work with him later.
Okay. Let's see. I'll throw a guard at you because this guy's going to go in the fourth round, and he's the number 2 guard on our board, and it's Jonah Jackson from Ohio State.
Okay.
He might actually go to the. He might
I think
actually go
he's
to the 49ers.
number 1 in our projection system, too.
He might actually go to the 49ers.
Okay.
Rutgers transferred to Ohio State. He's good in pass protection.
love it.
Pass protection at guard, super valuable, as you guys love to say.
Yes.
This has been a lot of fun. We're going to be in Indy starting this afternoon. We're going to have a PFF live show on Thursday night. It's going to be fun. We're going to have some really cool guests. Perhaps an offensive coordinator for potentially a team that won the Super Bowl. I don't know. Just saying. Could be kind of cool. Perhaps
If that's what you're into.
First name of champions.
Yeah, perhaps a guy that we just discussed, whether or not he should be drafted over another guy. I don't know. I'm just throwing some names out there. You can check out the 2-for-1 Drafts pod on Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. You should subscribe. It's awesome. And then the draft guide, you need to get it. So figure it out. Mike, thanks, brother.
Thank you.